Okay, so last class we learned about conditional statements, and I was in the class, and the other instructor dealt with it very, very well. And today we'll be moving to loops. We'll be moving to loops, and we'll now begin to see the tree we started. We started from the basics. We looked at the data types. We looked at variables, the rules of naming variables, the various data types we have, and we did some examples on data types. We played around them. Then we looked at how to use input statements to collect values. And last week we looked at conditional statements. And this week we'll be looking at loops. And I tell us, with the basics we've known so far, they are enough, kind of. They are enough. Although there are still many things we are still going to learn. But as it is, we are going higher and deeper into becoming a programmer. So looking at loops in Python, there are two major loops in Python, the for and the while loop. And from what I have here, loops is just what the name implies. Like when you have a loop or when you have a circle, when you are going through something over and over again, that's the concept of a loop. Take for example, we want to do something 10 times um, using programming. We don't need to write 10 lines of code repeatedly. All we just have to do is just create a loop and just put that single statement that wants to be executed over a period of time. We just put it inside that loop. So the loop iterates over those statements and it executes it as it goes and as it's coming. And that's the concept of loop. So when we are looping, we can actually loop over we can actually loop through a sequence, call it iteration. We can iterate over a sequence. We can loop for a number period of times, executing a particular block of statements. So what are the type of sequence you can actually loop through? We have list, we have tuple, we have dictionary, we have set, we have string. And we'll be doing some hands-on. Just like last week when on Wednesday, when we talked about conditional statements, one of the things, if you can remember, is when we are using conditional statements, indentation is very, very, very significant, very, very significant. So when we do if anything, then the full column, as soon as you press enter, the interpreter indent the next statement automatically. So if we mistakenly alter the indentation, there's going to be a problem because Python is very, very sensitive to indentation. So we should always take note of indentation when we are doing stuff, when you are working with Python generally. So tonight we'll start working on our example so that we can further understand how loop works. So we are starting with the for loop, and this is the syntax, as we can see here. For each element in sequence, then what I want to be done as it iterates, then I'll put it inside the indentation that follows. So let's take, for example, like we've said, that sequence in form of maybe list, tuple, dictionary, or set of strings. So looking at an example, we'll be running through some activities together. We have a list here, scores of students. So inside the list, we have 1, 2, 3, we have 6 elements. And the data type of those elements, as we all know, they are all integers. So they may be something else. And it may be a tuple, it may be a dictionary, so far as a sequence. So we can loop through this particular sequence, perform a particular block of instructions, perform it, as we iterate through the sequence. So the first thing we want to do is we want to print every score in this particular list. So using the syntax that I introduced to us, when we want to use for loop, we use for, then each of the elements, so each score. So we can decide to use another variable. This is just like when you are creating a variable. So for each score in scores of students, for each score in scores of students, then full column, then we press enter. So this scores of students, that is the sequence. As you can see, it's a list. Then each score, you can decide to give it any variable name you want to give it. So I just gave it each score so that it will tell anybody that is coming around to read my lines of code that, okay, this actually represents each score as I iterate over them. So the first thing we want to do is we want to print every score in that list. So all I just have to do is just do print. Then since the way it works is for the first time as it's coming, each score will be carrying value 34. So what do you want it to do first? I want it to print whatsoever value that each score is carrying. So it will print 34, then it will come back again. So when it's coming back, it will jump to 56. Then each score will now be carrying the value 56. Then whatsoever I want to do will be done inside this block of this line of statements. Then it will call back again. Then by that the time is coming back again for the third time, each score will be 88. Then what do I want to do? I want you to print 88 again. Then it goes like that, then over to 90. Then when it's done with it, it jumps out of the loop. So let me print this now. So as we can see the output. It's printed each element. It's printed each element out. So it's when it's done with the code that it gets outside the loop. So we can get the concept of loop now. It will keep iterating over the list, over the sequence until it is done. Let me add a particular recipe. Now let me say print. I want to print something. Print. All right, we are done. Now, we can take note of where I put print, all right, we are done. The indentation really matters, just like I said. This print is score is inside this loop. So, all right, we are done will be executed when it's done iterating over this sequence. So when it's done, that's when this will be done. So let me do it now. Shift enter. So as we can see, all right, we are done was printed when it's done iterating over the sequence. So let me add more recipe. Let me now, maybe I still want to do some other things inside the loop. So let's move on with our activity. Now maybe the next thing we want to do is we want to reduce each score using 0.8. That means I want each score to be reduced by 0.8. That means I want to multiply 34 by 0.8, 56 by 0.8, 88 by 0.8, 90 by 0.8, 34 by 0.8, 64 by 0.8. So all I just have to do is multiply each of the score with 0.8. So I believe we are getting the concept. So this each score is a variable name that changes through the sequence as we look through it. So it carries each of the elements in the sequence as it iterates. So like I said the other time, let me reemphasize, the each score for the first time will be carrying the value 34 because we are iterating over the list. So in this case now, when it's coming, each score will be 34. It will multiply 34 by 0.8 and it will print out the value. When it's coming back, each score is no longer 34, each score will be 56. So each score will now be 56, it multiplies it and it prints it. So let's run this and let's see the difference we have. So now, as we can see the difference. So multiplying 34 by 0.8 gives us 27.2000 up to 3. So we have actually done that. So that's the concept of for loop. Let's do the next activity. Store reduced values into a new variable called new score. Now, we've actually, what we did there was that we multiply each score as they are coming and we are printing it the same way. But it doesn't still change the value of scores of students. Let me prove that by printing scores of students outside my loop. So as you can see, scores of students still maintains the original value. So it doesn't change the original value. So whatever we are doing is still within the scope of the loop. So we were only printing inside the loop. When we printed the score of students once again, it still retains the value. So now the next activity for us is to store the reduced value into a new variable called new score. So what I will do is I will create an empty list before getting inside the loop, and I'll call it, according to the instruction given, new scores. But the new scores value now, I don't know yet, so I won't put anything inside of it. They call this type of a list empty list because it does not have any element inside of it. So now what the instruction I've now been giving now is, as the value is being reduced, I should add it into a new list. So now what I will do is there is a particular method that lists as, just like I've said that we should go and learn a lot of methods. We can't treat everything. So what I will do is I will do dot append. So by doing dot append, I'm adding to the element of the empty list I've created outside this loop. So this line was executed first, this line follows, then we entered into the loop. So what do I want to append? I want to append each score multiplied by 0.8. So in this case now, I'm not printing anything. So if I run this now, we won't see any output. So as you can see, no output. Now, it's not as if it has not done anything. Now let's see what it has done. So let me print the initial score of students. Then let me print the new list we've created and we've appended values into. So new scores. So shift enter. So we can see. So this is the new list down here, and this is the old list. So we worked on so the values were coming, we were adding them into the new list. So let me explain the sequence once again. This is a list that has values inside. This is an empty list. We are iterating over this list, and this is a variable that keeps changing as we iterate. So it carries, and it starts from the 0 index even to the last index. So as the values is changes, we multiply it by 0.8, and we are appending whatsoever that is the result. We are appending it with an empty list we've created. So if we can take note of where I printed my scores of students, I didn't print it inside the loop. I mean, doing something like this would be very, very wrong. I didn't print it inside here because as at this moment, it's not done. It will still be iterating, because at the first time, 34, each score will be 34. To multiply it, to append it to new score, then I'm not asking it to print scores of students immediately, printing new scores again. No, it's not done yet. So what I will do is, when it's done, so I will do that by doing all this outside the loop. So now we can see the strength of indentation. So we have to be careful when we are indenting. So at this point, I would like to ask if there's any question before I continue. So any question from us? Do you have any question?
No question from me.
Okay, sir. Okay. So I will continue in the confidence that we are following. So the next activity is find the average of the score. Find the average of the score. So now we know how to find the average of anything. Now that means we need to add all the elements. Then we need to divide it by the number of elements that are there. That means we have to add 34 with 50 plus 56 plus 88 plus 90 plus 34 plus 64. So now what I'm going to do is this. You cannot watch me, so I will do let me create a variable outside my loop called total. Then I will initialize it to be 0. Then I will do total equals total plus each score. Then I need the list, so the length. So I will do score length equals scores of students plus length. Then what I do is outside the loop, and store the average value into a variable called AVG score. So AVG score was total divided by score length. Then print AVG score. Now let me run it. Okay. As an attribute len. Okay. Okay. Okay, are we together? So, come in, let me be very sure. Okay, so let me explain what we have here. Very, very simple, if we'll be following. Now, we know that we want to find the average of the scores inside the list we have now. So now we've understood how loop works. So now what we are doing is for the first time each score will be 34, as we all agreed. Now what I did was that I created an initial value for the sum to be 0. Then that means at this point, and like you remember on the first day, I said programming things from behind. It does not think like human being, it does not read like human being, things from behind. So now, the first time, each score will be 34. Then total, we see total to be 0. That will be 0 plus 34. To store that value inside total. Now, when it's going back again, each score will now be 56. It will do this line. Then each score 56 plus total. So at this point now, total is not being recognized as 0 again. Total is now being recognized as 34. So that will be 56 plus 34. So that will give us 90. It goes again. By the time it's coming again, each score is now 88. So 88 will be each score plus 90. So that will be 90 plus 88. That will give us 178. Then to go again, a score will be 90. That will add 90 plus 170. So it will continue and keep updating the value of this variable called total. So when it's done, you now have total will no longer be 0. Total will not be carrying the total sum. So that's how we arrive at adding all the elements inside our sequence. Now we need the total length, the length of all the elements inside the sequence. So we just had to run this method. Len, then we put the list inside. So by doing that, it's going to look at the length. That's the length. It's going to count the number of elements inside this list and store it inside score length. So now, as we know, average value equals total divided by score length. So the total now will now be the sum of all the elements here, and the score length will be the length. The length, that means the length of all the elements inside the scores of the student. So that's how we were able to get the variable avg underscore score, and we printed that out. So let me do one more thing. Let me print the total score. Let me print the total. Then let me also print, okay, I think that's all. By pre-shift enter. So we can see the total as 369. So what it did was that 369 divided by 6. So it gave us 61.5. So I don't know if there's any other question before we do the last activity under this section. Any question? Any question?
Robert,
Yeah.
did you print the average score to be 369?
No, the average
score 61.5. I couldn't see it. Okay. I've seen it now.
Okay. Anyone with question again before we move on? Okay, there's a last activity here. Okay, someone is raising up his hand. Okay, bro Tommy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So please also to get a recap of what you've been doing. What exactly are we doing today?
Oh, okay. Okay. Now we have 8 minutes, and so the remaining 8 minutes, please let's log in back using the link. This session will end in the next 7:50 minutes. So I will run through it quickly. I will run quickly because we've not gone far. I will have said what you, but we've not gone far. So loop is just like when we say someone keep going through a circle and doing the same thing. When I say someone is within a loop, that means the person is doing the same thing over and over again. So that is the concept of loop. Maybe you want to write print. I want to print Emmanuel 20 times. I don't need to write print Emmanuel, print Emmanuel, print Emmanuel. No, all I just have to do is create a loop that will take me 20 times, and I'll just put print Emmanuel inside that loop. So it will just iterate over it itself, and it will execute that block of statement. So we iterate over sequence, and we perform some block of statements in that for loop. So we can iterate over sequence like list, like tuple, like dictionary, like set, and even like a string. You can iterate over maybe a name. You can iterate over each of the character in the string. So now what we are doing, anytime we are doing for loop, we have to be very careful of indentation because it's very, very powerful. Just like we learned last week, when we are using if also, we have to be careful of indentation. So when we use for loop, the block of statements we want to execute inside that loop are being indented. So anything we put on the same line with any line of code, they are being executed sequentially. But when we put anything inside a particular indenting it, that means it will execute what is inside the indentation first before coming back to the sequential way of doing it. So we consider the particular example here. This is a list. Now we use our for loop to iterate over them. And the syntax for iterating is for each element in sequence. So in this case now, for each score in scores of students. Scores of students is just a variable carrying list of scores. Now, this each score is a variable name. You can decide to change yours. You can decide to use maybe A, B, or whatsoever. But this each score is being changed over time. So this is how it works. For each score in scores of students. Now, for the first time, since the scores of students is 34, 56, 88, 90, 34 to 67, for the first time, the each score will be carrying the value 34. So now, take for example, if you look at the activities we'll be given, we're asked to print each score. So what I will do is, inside there, I will just do print each score. So that we print the first time, each score will be carrying the value 34 to print 34. It will go back again, iterating over the sequence. It will print 56. It will go back again. It will keep iterating until it gets to the last element in that sequence before it gets out of the indentation and come back to the normal straight line and start executing whatsoever we have there. So we're using print score inside this indentation. That we answer the first activity. Then the second activity says we should reduce each score by 0.8. So we just multiply each score by 0.8 and we'll print out whatsoever we have at that moment. Then the other one says we should store reduced value in a new variable called new score. So now we want to, after reducing each of the elements by 0.8, we want to store it in a new list. So what we did was that we created an empty list here. This is an empty list here. Then as we reduce each value by 0.8, we append it. This is a method that is known to list. So we append the reduced value into the empty list we've created. So it keeps doing that, and it will go back again. It will do it, it will reduce it, it will go back until it gets to the last element, which is 67. So by doing that, we answered this line. Then we're asked to find the average of the score. So the way of finding the average of a score is by first adding all the elements inside the list, then we divide it by the length of the element. So I also use for loop to capture the total length. So what I did was that I created I initialize a variable here, total to be 0. Then the first time it's coming, total is 0 here. Each score is 34, so it adds 34 with 0, and it stores it inside the same variable called total. So total will now be 34. When it's coming back again, each score is now 56. That will be 56 plus total is no longer 0. Total is now 34. So that will be 34 plus 56. We now have total to be 90. And it goes back again. When it's coming, each score is now 88. So each score, I add this to the previous value of. So it will continue that iteration until it gets to the last element, which is 67. So when it's done, total is now carrying the total sum it has added over the iteration. Now, how do we get the length of the number of elements in this list? So we use this method called len scores of students. So this scores of students is the list. So we find the length. So that's the method that we get. So it will store the length inside a variable called score length. So we get our average score by dividing the total score that has been accumulated divided by the length. Then we print the average score out. So that's how we've gotten there, and that's the code we are seeing here. So any question? I know I'm a bit fast, but I know you were able to catch what I don't want this session to extend to the next session. So any question, Brotomi?
I understand, but I only have one problem. Where did each score? Which variable did you? Where did you save each score as a variable?
You are the one that will give. You see, anything that will be represented here, you are the one that will give it that name. So you can decide to give it any name, but any name you give to it will be the variable representing each of the elements in the sequence. So I can decide to call this A. I use this code because I want it to be something that explains what I'm doing. So I can decide to make it A. I can decide to make it B. If I make it A, that means when I'm inside this loop, A will be representing 34 for the first time. When I'm coming back, A will be representing 50. So as I'm doing print A here now, I won't be printing E score again. I'll be printing A. So the A here is just something that you are the one that will select it. You are the one that will select it. So it's a variable you will have to create as you are making use of the for loop. I don't know if you got it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So this section will end now, and we'll be answering the last attending to the last activity using the last session. So the last activities ask us that any score less than 50 should be removed from the list.